Defeated, humiliated, and shattered after the First World War, Germany seemed condemned to ruin. Its army was reduced, its economy collapsed, and its national pride broken, painting the portrait of a country with no future. So how could a bankrupt state, monitored closely by its victors, rebuild a fearsome army, challenge the great powers, and conquer entire nations? The answer lies in a strategy as brutal as it was fast, in a military machine unlike any other, and in a series of mistakes its enemies should never have made. This is the story of the dizzying Nazi rise, and how its shadow spread across the world. Before brutality took over the global stage, 1930s Europe was a continent marked by scars and distrust. The Treaty of Versailles had left Germany humiliated and impoverished, with military restrictions many considered intolerable.
There's no question that most Germans felt outraged by the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles, the shrinking of the army to just 100,000 and the loss of territory and these massive reparations, which everybody knew were going to have serious economic consequences. And the reason they objected was because it implied that Germany was responsible for the First World War, and this was their punishment.
But in the shadows, a man with a radical vision and boundless ambition was preparing to defy it. Adolf Hitler had a plan to destroy Germany's enemies, and he understood that simply rebuilding the army would not be enough. He needed to dismantle the mechanisms that could stop him, starting with the restrictions in the Rhineland.
Territorial losses are quite significant. They lose territory in the east to the Poles and to the Czechs, and they're forced to demilitarize the Rhineland, so they can't use it as a launch pad for a renewed invasion of Belgium and France.
In 1936, remilitarizing that region became his first bold move. German troops marched into an area that, under the treaty, had to remain demilitarized. France and the United Kingdom protested, but took no action. That was Hitler's first test, and he learned a crucial lesson. His rivals feared war more than they feared his advance. Inside Germany, any opposition had been neutralized. The left was fractured between communists and social democrats, unable to form a common front. Conservatives, convinced they could control the Führer, soon discovered that he was the one controlling them. With power consolidated, authoritarian decrees and mass imprisonments silenced all dissent. The rest of Europe was not prepared to stop him either. The trauma of the First World War was still fresh, and no government wanted to risk another bloodbath. France and the United Kingdom embraced a policy of appeasement, convinced that yielding to certain demands could prevent a larger conflict. But that mindset created the perfect scenario for a political predator who knew exactly when and where to strike.
Appeasement has come to be a byword for weakness, and its failure to avoid war in the 1930s has been invoked as a reason to avoid resorting to it since then. Each concession to German demands gradually built up in Hitler's mind a belief that Britain and France were not a serious threat to his ambitions, and encouraged him to take further steps to war. So, instead of avoiding conflict, appeasement made it ever more possible.
And even before cannons thundered, Hitler had already expanded the borders of his new Reich. His first major move was the Anschluss of Austria in March 1938. German troops crossed the border without resistance, greeted by crowds waving swastika flags. It was presented as the union of two brotherly peoples, and once again the Western powers did nothing.
Whether German troops crossed into Austria before they were invited or not is now only an academic and unimportant point. They crossed and met with no opposition. Instead, they found welcome and rejoicing among sympathizers, and those who dissented either stayed away or feigned enthusiasm. Removing the frontier barrier at Kufstein becomes almost a ritual. It goes to the museum or perhaps to the bonfire. Epitome of the great bloodless revolution which has agitated the world, German troops crossed the Danube at Passau.
That same year, Hitler set his sights on Czechoslovakia, a country with a large German-speaking minority in the Sudetenland. Using the rhetoric of protecting his citizens, he pressured for the territory to be ceded. In September, the Munich Agreement sealed the deal. The UK and France accepted the loss of the Sudetenland in exchange for the promise that there would be no further demands. But that promise meant nothing. In March 1939, German troops occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia, proving that Hitler would never settle for partial concessions. With these moves, he not only expanded German territory, but also demonstrated his ability to redraw Europe's borders without firing a single shot.
Slovakia becomes independent, Czechoslovakia disappears, German troops occupy Prague. Bitter is the cup of humiliation which the Czechs must suffer. But in this turn of events, world peace is not threatened. Thus relieved, humanity may turn to those signs of constructive effort for peace which are accumulating around us.
These annexations taught Hitler a decisive lesson. His adversaries were slow, indecisive, and afraid. Each success strengthened his belief that the path toward a dominant Reich was wide open, and the true clash, the war that would set the continent ablaze, had not even begun. But it was close. On August 23, 1939, Europe held its breath. Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, enemies in every ideological sense, signed a non-aggression pact. Officially, the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact guaranteed that neither nation would attack the other for 10 years. But the most disturbing element lay in its secret clauses, an agreement to divide Eastern Europe like pieces on a chessboard. Poland would be split in half. The Baltic states would fall under Soviet influence, while Germany expanded westward and southward. Stalin gained time to rearm, and Hitler ensured that when his offensive began, he would not have to fear an Eastern Front. 1 week later, on September 1st, 1939, the Wehrmacht crossed into Poland. 3 days afterward, the United Kingdom and France declared war on Germany, marking the official outbreak of the Second World War. Yet the temporary alliance had already paid off. On September 17th, the USSR invaded Poland from the east, sealing the country's defeat within weeks.
And on top of the car, guards with drawn pistols. In a cloud of dust, and then through the clouds of the sky, by plane, Hitler flies to survey what he has done, the destruction of a nation. Poland divided between the Nazi Germans and the Soviets.
For the Führer, it was a masterstroke. He had avoided the nightmare of a two-front war and could unleash his entire military machine on the West. Europe watched in astonishment as communism and Nazism, united out of convenience, tore apart nations in broad daylight. The shock was immense, and this was only the beginning. European powers were still thinking in terms of trenches and attrition, as in the First World War. With that outdated mentality, they prepared for battle. Meanwhile, Hitler and his high command embraced a radically different strategy. Blitzkrieg, lightning war, developed by Heinz Guderian.
The Germans used tanks in concentration. They were used as the point of a spear instead of being spread out along the front.
Guderian was aware that tanks on their own would be vulnerable to Allied counterattack. They needed close support.
The key to the Blitzkrieg was the combination of armor, infantry, artillery, and the Luftwaffe with the Stuka dive bomb.
The concept was simple in theory and devastating in practice. Fast, concentrated attacks combining tanks, aircraft, and motorized infantry in a single blow. Panzers would pierce enemy lines. Stukas would bomb key positions. Motorized troops would rush into the gaps to sow chaos in the rear. There was no time to reorganize. The enemy was paralyzed before it could react. Poland was the first demonstration, falling in just over 4 weeks. Then, in April 1940, Blitzkrieg reached Denmark and Norway, which were occupied in days and weeks respectively.
So, on April 9th, Hitler invaded Denmark and Norway. Denmark was powerless to resist and didn't. Norway was stunned by an avalanche of force and treachery. Fifth columnists, led by Major Quisling, a Norwegian traitor, spread panic and confusion.
But the true shock came in May. when Germany struck the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. Instead of repeating the slow grind of 1914, the Germans charged through the Ardennes, a region the Allies believed impassable for tanks, and reached the English Channel in a matter of days. Belgium surrendered in 2 weeks. France, one of the world's strongest military powers, collapsed in just 6.
When the people of Paris come to the streets again, it is to hear the voice of dictators, telling them what they must do, how they must live, what they must say, what they must think, telling them how to be slaves. Gone is the Republic of France. Gone is free speech and a free representative government. Gone is liberty, equality, fraternity.
Blitzkrieg was not only a military tactic, it was psychological warfare. Cities fell so quickly that governments collapsed internally before enemy troops even arrived. But this perfect storm had limits. When applied against the United Kingdom in the Battle of Britain, Blitzkrieg met its first real obstacle. What had worked like a precision hammer on land failed in the skues. Those early years were Hitler's most successful. The world saw him as a brilliant strategist, capable of detecting and exploiting enemy weaknesses with astonishing speed. But his opponents didn't just fear Hitler's mind. They feared the sheer power of the military behind him. The Wehrmacht was not simply an army. It was a precision-built instrument designed for modern war. While other European nations still relied on cavalry, heavy infantry, and static defenses, Germany built a fast, mechanized, and deadly force, designed to unleash Blitzkrieg at full scale. On the ground, panzers formed the backbone. The Panzer IV, versatile and reliable, and the fearsome Tiger, with its thick armor and heavy firepower, became icons of the German advance, but they never operated alone. Motorized units followed closely, securing territory and maintaining the rapid pace of the offensive. In the air, the Luftwaffe dominated from the very beginning. Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters controlled the skies, while Stuka dive bombers terrified their targets with their infamous siren wail before releasing their bombs. This combination shredded enemy lines before infantry even arrived. Coordination was another decisive factor. The German army trained for ground and air forces to operate as one organism. Every movement was meticulously planned, yet flexible enough to adapt to terrain and to the enemy.
The main point is to find this weak point in the Allied line, then apply as maximum mechanized pressure you can to that and break through into the rear areas. You need to be able to act flexibly, quickly, and change the axis of your attack extremely quickly. So German junior commanders could make very big decisions. Perhaps they'd been told to attack down a particular axis towards a hill or something, and they could see that that was really well defended. They had the opportunity to say, not going in that direction, we're going to get bogged down. Over there, to our right flank, that seems to be much less well defended. We're turning right, we're going that direction, we'll break through much quicker.
This approach contrasted sharply with the rigidity of many Allied high commands, still clinging to doctrines from the previous war. While Nazi units made decisions in minutes, Allied operations often took hours or days to adjust. And as if that weren't enough, morale also played a crucial role. German troops entered battle well-trained, motivated, and backed by propaganda that convinced them they were fighting for a historic cause. Many of their adversaries, by contrast, faced political uncertainty and lacked a clear objective beyond resistance. The results were undeniable. Between April and June 1940, the map of Western Europe changed forever. By 1941, more than 280 million Europeans lived under German control or under its allied and puppet governments. The Reich now dominated 3.3 million square kilometers, from the Atlantic coast to the Balkans. The conquests were so fast they triggered panic among governments and civilians alike. Even the Western powers appeared unable to stop the rising tide. In less than 2 years, Germany had gone from a nation constrained by treaties to the undisputed master of half a continent. The question was no longer whether it could conquer more, but who and when would dare to confront it. Yet Hitler's ambition and the core of his own strategy would ultimately turn against the Third Reich.
The whole point of Blitzkrieg is to keep moving, don't stop, because if you stop, you get entangled in a battle of attrition. Keep moving, always look for the weak point.
When Germany stood at the peak of its power, the idea of advancing without pause confronted it with a challenge as vast as the Soviet Union. By mid-1941, the Reich controlled territory from Norway to Greece and from the French Atlantic coast to the borders of the USSR. Most major European powers had been defeated or neutralized. Only the United Kingdom persisted, isolated on its island, protected by the Royal Navy and the RAF. Many historians believe that this was Hitler's moment to consolidate power. He could have strengthened defenses in the West, controlled sea routes, and slowly strangled the United Kingdom through blockades and bombing. With the continent under his command, he could have dictated the rhythm of the war and forced a favorable peace. But Hitler believed he saw further. Convinced that the Soviet Union was the true ideological and strategic enemy, he opened a second front. On June 22, 1941, he launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history. The Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact was shattered, and the Wehrmacht surged into an immense, hostile territory. That decision stretched German resources thin and reshaped the war. The Eastern Front consumed millions of soldiers and vast amounts of material, becoming a bottomless pit of lives and equipment. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom gained precious time to reorganize, receive American aid, and prepare to strike back. Germany's domination of half of Europe remained impressive, but fighting on two fronts meant the Wehrmacht could no longer concentrate its full might on a single objective. What might have become an impregnable empire began to show cracks. In the end, Nazi Germany's lightning conquest of half of Europe resulted from a lethal combination of political manipulation, military innovation, and the weakness of its adversaries. Hitler exploited internal divisions and the Western powers' fear of another war, striking with speed and precision every time. But even empires that seem invincible are vulnerable to their own decisions. By opening the Eastern Front, Hitler changed the course of the Second World War and sealed the fate of his Reich. Conquering is not enough. The real challenge is knowing when to stop. Thus, we come to the end. If you liked this video, we'll be waiting for you in our next installment of War Documents.